Welcome, one and all, to the 7th International Workshop, which will be conducted on a span of 3 days, starting from today, as in 21st May to 23rd May. About Mediate Guru. Mediate Guru is a social initiative led by members across the globe. The aim of our organization is to bridge the gap between the general public and litigation. We are creating a social awareness campaign for showcasing mediation as the future. Having successfully conducted various international webinars promoting alternative dispute resolution, having a reach of more than 100 countries around the world, with an international family growing each day. We strive to provide you the best lecture series through the best speakers around the globe so that you have a value addition today. I feel honored today to welcome our esteemed speaker for session 1 of the International Workshop. The very first speaker of the webinar is Ms. Kathleen Ruane Leedy. She will deliver a lecture on the narratives of mediation. Ma'am is a bi-coastal mediator trained in Atlanta, Boston, and Cape Cod and Tacoma. She is now based in Queens, New York. She has an experience in mediating over a wide range of cases, including small claims, divorce, business, workplace, and family issues. She particularly specializes in high conflict mediations involving restarting orders with a 95% agreement rate. Successfully advocated and increased in Army Social's medical discharge ratings in Fort Bliss, Texas. She also teaches the 40 hours basic mediation class at Drake University Law School with Dick Calkins in Iowa. Selected to author one chapter on mediation in a book about divorce titled Worry Free Divorce. Apart from such a dynamic career, she has participated in live radio talk shows for Impact Makers Radio titled Discusses the Magic of Mediating Tough Issues, and a Seattle radio station live talk show called Why Mediation. Spoke in a podcast for Marketing Resolution Worldwide titled Building a Private Practice. We are glad to have you on board, ma'am. Thank you so much. You may continue, ma'am.
Thank you for such a kind introduction, Malika. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So enjoyed watching the slideshow as I was waiting to speak to everyone. And I'm also so excited to be part of this 3-day workshop, along with Juan tomorrow, who's going to speak about the alternative methods of ADR and collective bargaining, and Brian, our last speaker in this 3-day workshop on the lawyer's role of mediation. So today, in this presentation, I'd just like to kind of have a fireside chat about mediation in regard to mediation as a process, but it's also an art form. And so the 3 essential narratives of mediation is more about the art form. And I think the art form is really interesting because oftentimes as mediators, we want to put people into the process right away. And we forget about the art form part of mediation, that we're dealing with human beings across the table and with us. And the way that it's most emphasized to me is when I have this talk with people, people say their feedback is even in commercial mediations, Kathleen, and business mediations. And I'm like, yes, because at the end of the day, money can make a lot of people upset if it's not going their way. And at the end of the day, we also are all human beings. I once worked for a director in central Massachusetts involved with a mediation program in the courts. And she was very famous for saying, all mediation is a conversation. And that's what we want to think about today, is this conversation of mediation, and how do we have this art form, and what are the narratives that we have in the mediation process. So I'm going to start the slide presentation. And this is what I see also for lawyers. Lawyers, I think it's important that lawyers learn soft skills for dealing with people, in addition to your amazing training in law school and your amazing practices of being lawyers. We also have these soft skills that are a necessary part of the art form of mediation. That is the art of conversation, as well as negotiation and everything else that's going on at the at the mediation table. So here we go, the 3 essential narratives of mediation as how I see it. We always have these 3 essential narratives present at the mediation table. And they are the words of the person, the people present, the body language of all the people present, including us as well as mediators, and the emotions that are present either under the surface or coming to the top and visible to all. And we journey into the unknown, and that's why I selected these pictures. We do journey into the unknown at the mediation table. We have no idea. Even if we prepare, we know the facts, which is important to a mediator to be able to do that. We still have a journey into the unknown, and I think that we really need to be just aware of that and actually look forward to it, be curious about it, but it is definitely a journey into the unknown. So let's look at each one of these 3 essential narratives, starting with the words. And I think these 3 essential narratives are really taken for granted, and I think the words are very much taken for granted. I am a follower of word choice and tone is vital to notice. It's vital for a mediator to memorize, especially keywords, and it's vital to reiterate. And reiteration, I mean actually using the actual words that people use at the mediation table. The word choice, each word has an emotional value to the person that's saying them. Each word that stands out should, I think, be memorized by the mediator and reiterated back in the summary. And these soft skills also, as I've mentioned earlier, can be utilized in regular relationships, in business relationships, and at home relationships. And these reiteration and memorizing and vital to notice concepts surrounding words that people use are also, they can be used anywhere. I have my students, my mentee students, I have them practice on their friends and family and anywhere they can. So it's important to notice these words, realize that every single word has an emotional value, and pay attention to the words that seem to be emphasized. We also have our body language. And body language is interesting. People like to talk about body language as 70% of a conversation with people. And I don't quite look at it that way. I look more at the raw research about body language, at least the research I've seen. And body language is important in mediation and in soft skill understanding of people when it's disagreeing with the words, when it doesn't really seem to belong. Like this, I picked this picture of a surfboard because it kind of belongs to the ocean and the sand, but it's doing something different. We could be walking along this ocean, as I was a couple days ago in Florida, and we could be enjoying it. But if we jumped on a surfboard and we started to surf, it would be something different. And that's how body language is. If you've got someone at the mediation table or someone in a conversation saying the words, yes, I guess I'll do that. Yes, I agree. But you see their head going a little bit like no, or you see them hesitate with their shoulders. You see them, sometimes people will even go, they'll actually shake their head no as they're saying yes, or their voice will lower. That's very important to notice that. And as a mediator, my soft skill, my toolbox skills as a mediator would be to say, well, thank you for that yes that I heard you say, but I also heard your voice get lower as you said that yes. So what does that mean? We'll talk more about what to do about that in a little bit. The emotions are very important at the mediation table, and oftentimes mediators, we try to push these especially strong emotions away. That's why I have this picture, this very strong emotional picture, and oftentimes mediators want to jump into private session, or they want to consider that client at the mediation table a disturbance now because of this outburst of emotion. So we have to remember that emotions, they're natural. And they are an instinctive state of mind because of the mood at the table, because of the circumstances, because of something they've heard. So we have this wider range of emotions that can be present at the mediation table. And they are forces, they're energy forces coming from people. And they're energy forces when we're sitting around and talking with our family. So we have a range of emotions. But please keep in mind as we move forward, and what the art form of mediating at this moment with this slide is the fact that these are natural. And for some reason, this instinctive state is coming out of a person. As a mediator, we need to accept that into our process, regard it as valuable, and clarify that like anything else that we clarify at the mediation table. What I would like to do is have us consider mediation, this art form, this anger energy that can come out of someone more as music. And if you watch the slide presentation later on, there's a musical tone to this, because when we're back here in our previous slide, we have this anger emotion that comes out when people are yelling. And I don't know if this will work when I push it, but we can give it a try. Don't think so, yeah. So people are yelling and screaming and yelling and raising their voices and doing all these kinds of things. Because it's a natural instinctive reaction kind of person, I'd like us to consider this a form of music. I'd like us as mediators to look at this noise coming out of a person, instead of being so shocking and upsetting, as music coming from inside a person onto the mediation table, not to be judged, but to be clarified. So it makes sense for the process that's going on. It makes sense for everyone at the table. It's just not this big interruption. If we consider that people are just vessels, all of us are contained in a vessel that we call the body, and sometimes things erupt out of us. I consider this eruption of anger and a musical tone to be a third narrative at the mediation table, and very important to clarify, very important to honor. Just like we honor words, just like we honor body language, we also need to honor emotions at the mediation table, especially the very strong emotions. Because if we're going to honor a person and people sitting at our mediation table, we have unique people, and they're containing all three of these narratives. And everyone's so different at the mediation table. And we don't want to think that we understand someone because we've had cases before. We don't want to think that we understand our friends or our parents or people in our world because we know them. We need to understand that in this moment, things are happening in our world, that we need to apply our soft skills, our understanding to people, our understanding as a mediator on the mediation table, instead of judgment. And judgment is the killer in my mind. When we start to judge people at our mediation table, and we don't stay in the art form of being accepting, we don't stay in the art form of really being curious, we don't stay in the art form of honoring what's happening with this person, we start to break away from our neutrality as a mediator. We really need to understand that our neutrality is one of our main cores of what we offer to people in mediation. We are a third neutral party that's helping them. So we really need to be comfortable with the art form of helping people in mediation, no matter what they're presenting, no matter what they're presenting with their words, no matter what they're presenting with their body language, no matter what they're presenting with emotions that are strong or shut down or in the middle somehow, some way, because we do have complete and unique people at our mediation table. So let's look into these three essential narratives, and I call them essential. One of my mentees actually coined the term for me when I was showing him the slide presentation. And I said to him, you're right, these are essential, because mediation is a praxis. We're always learning from each other. We're learning inside ourselves to grow as a mediator. Hopefully we're growing all the time. We're learning from other people that are in our world. We're learning from our parties, our clients at our mediation table. So let's start with the words. It is very important to memorize keywords and reiterate them as we summarize what we hear people say. A mediator's summary doesn't have to be lengthy. It could be very short. It could be long. If we've got someone saying a lot, we could actually have a long summary. But as a mediator, it's our job, if we're going to contribute to this art form in our practice, we need to memorize those words. We need to memorize keywords like trust, I'm angry, I don't think this will work, I'm not confident. And those words are coming from an important narrative inside a person. And I consider the words, the body language, and the emotions an essential narrative, like a life force, like breathing, like the flow of our blood through our body. It is essential. So our job as a mediator to honor that person with words is to memorize them, to write them down as you hear them, and to memorize them, and then to look down at your paper and reiterate them as you're summarizing back. And your summary could be simple, something as simple as, so for you, this is about trust. For you, this is about lack of confidence. Our mediation summaries don't have to be lengthy. They can just be a one-liner when we pull a key word out of the conversation, especially if we want the mediation to move along. Or if it's a lengthy reiteration summary, how do you do that? When someone goes on for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes in what they're talking about, we need to grab in our summary, are we going to start at the beginning of what they've said? And this is the art form of mediation. Are we going to start with the last thing they said and summarize backwards? Are we going to start with the beginning of what they said and summarize forward? Or does something jump out at us in the middle of what they're talking about that we can start summarizing in the middle and then move to the beginning and then finish with the ending? So this art form is very important. Sometimes if I do not use inflection enough and I don't raise my tone with emotionally charged words that I hear people say, they will continue to repeat what they said to me. And I have summarized what they've said to me. So the art form needs to understand that, oh, I didn't use that keyword enough with enough emphasis. So I summarize and they repeat what I've already summarized, and that's when I know. So I will say something like, oh, so this is really important for this to be understood. And when I go really important, the person nods their head. And just that inflection. So sometimes an art form reiteration summary needs inflection. We have to match the tenor of the emotion that's attached to the words that people say. The body language, as I've already mentioned, we need to notice it when it's opposite of their words. And at the mediation table, because as mediators, our 2 main jobs are to clarify and help people reach agreement, we can say at our mediation table for more clarity. So Melika, thank you so much for what you said. And I heard you agree to what you're saying, but then you hesitated as you were talking about how you were willing to agree to that. So can you please tell me, because I hear this hesitation in your voice, but I hear your words saying the right thing, quote unquote. So please help me understand better. We can jump into that body language distraction or not aligning with their words and actually have a person clarify it. And these are mastery skills. These work a lot. And or not even almost every time. When I say a mastery skill, for me, it works 100% of the time. And when someone hears that, because they know that they've done that. When someone hears that, well, you're shaking your head no, as you're saying yes, they understand, or now we've clarified for them, so we can move on together with that. The powerful emotions are a little bit different. They're intimidating. So we're going to go to a separate slide on powerful emotions, and I want you to know how I handle it. It works every time for me, so I call it a mastery skill. Remember, I don't look at those powerful emotions as an outburst that I'm offended as a mediator because now someone's gotten upset on my mediation table. I'm worried about everyone else. I'm not doing any of those things as a facilitated mediator, even in business mediations, even in workplace mediations. I'm welcoming it, because it's been a narrative that's been hidden, and now we've got anger, sadness, grief, whatever the strong emotion is, now we've got it out on the mediation table. As a neutral mediator, I am grateful for this opportunity of this strong emotions being revealed. So I'm going to take us through the process that I consider a mastery skill process, that I consider as to people's soft skills, that I consider works almost 100% of the time, if not 100% of the time, for the person that has now erupted on our mediation table. So to start off with, I am not going to end a mediation at that moment because someone's gotten upset. The first thing, and I want to go through these slowly because they're all very important and they do work every time for me. The first thing that I want to say to that person is I want to express gratitude. And I will say, thank you very much for being willing to be this honest with us right now at this mediation table. I'm slowly neutralizing what's happened, but not in a way that's not validating, not in a way that's dishonoring. I'm using neutral terms like this mediation table for being willing to be honest. I'm validating, I'm neutralizing, I'm showing gratitude all at the same time. So that I always open with a statement of gratitude. In my statement of gratitude, I say thank you all the time as a mediator. That might not be your statement of gratitude, or that may not be something you use as a lawyer in training with someone that's really upset. So you need to have a statement of gratitude in your own way. As I like to say, every mediator needs to develop their style, their confidence, and their courage. So your gratitude is according to your style. Then I measure. I logistically want to take someone who's upset to their left brain because they're in this emotional hijacking right now. They really don't have control. It's a natural reaction. So I'm taking them to their left brain. And I say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important to you is what you just said? Or if it's obvious, I'll say, well, that sounded like that was a 10 out of 10 for you. And you have total 100%, 10 out of 10 integrity about what just happened. And they will nod their head yes. The point is, I'm still validating when I'm measuring, but I'm also saying to them, I want to know how upset you are, and I want you to think about how upset you are. Is it a 1 out of 10? Is it a 2? Sometimes people will erupt on the mediation table, and then they'll say, well, actually, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's really a 5 for me. Sorry, I didn't mean to have this outburst. It's really only a 5. But I want them to measure it. And then as the mediator, I'm finally going to summarize. The first two of gratitude and measure, these soft skills, I am dealing with the energy from the person. I'm not dealing with the person yet. They've left their prefrontal cortex where they can think. They've had this outburst from the back of their brain. That's a primitive reaction. So as a mediator, I choose to deal with the energy first. So I express gratitude, I measure it, and then I summarize. So as your mediator, which again is a neutral statement, I want to summarize what I've heard you say. Remember, I'm doing this in front of the other people at the mediation table. So they're having a chance to sit there and listen and maybe calm down, maybe not, but they're actually watching all of this. And the last thing I say is, what do you need? What would it be that you need right now? Sometimes people don't know what they need. So what do? I thank them. Thank you for being willing to say you just don't really know what you need right now. And they'll go yes again. And that's okay, because again, as a mediator, it's my job to clarify. So right now with these 4 steps, this art form of mediation, I have clarified for myself. I've clarified for the person that has the eruption. I've also clarified for the other people sitting at the table. And that's my job to clarify. And that's why I can do this, because it's happening at my mediation table. Therefore, it's my responsibility to clarify. But now we've got other people that have been listening to this. So now I actually turn my chair with my body language, and I look directly at the other person or other people. And I say to them, please look at me, your mediator. Again, this is more of the art form, so it has to go according to your style. Please look right at me, your mediator. And I literally say to them, how was that for you to hear? Because these other people at the mediation table are sitting there with this reaction, this energy reaction inside them. And research tells us that when people yell at the mediation table or they start to cry loudly, that even the sound waves get compressed. So all these compressed sound waves are hitting everyone at the mediation table. So I'm asking them, how is that for you to hear? This is mediator style, confidence, and courage. It might sound like, oh my gosh, I cannot ask someone. Yes, you can. And the reason that you can ask someone about how is that for you to hear, because it happened at your mediation table. You're the mediator. You're in charge of this process. So how is that for you to hear? And they're going to tell you, how was that for you to hear? For them to hear. Then you're going to measure it just like you did with the other side on a scale of 1 to 10. How is that for you to hear? That was about a 3. That was about a 5. That was about a 10. So you're measuring it. So you're validating, you're clarifying. But then it's very important for the other person for you to ask in this art form of mediating, what did you hear? Because it's not necessarily going to be true that they heard what the person said, that they heard what I heard. So to totally honor and validate them as mediators, we need to ask them, what did you hear? When they tell us what they heard, then we can summarize. So as your mediator, I heard you say this, you heard this, this, and this. Again, we're pulling out the key words. Again, we're reiterating them. We're validating. We're not changing their words. We're not lowering the emphasis. We're not trying to reframe their words. If they say angry, I say angry. I don't want to reframe someone. I don't normally reframe too much as a mediator in mediations until later on in the process. I'll try to reframe something negative up to more positive. But in the opening part of mediations or in the opening narratives or when people get upset, I don't want to reframe people getting upset until after I validate and clarify. People need to be validated. People need to be honored at our mediation table. So I'm going to summarize what I'm hearing, again, in this art form process. The most important sentence in summarizing being, is there anything else? Is there anything else? I keep asking, is there anything else, until they're done. Then I'm done summarizing when they say, no, there's nothing else, Kathleen. And then I ask, what do you need? Now we have at our table, we may have two people that need different things. Again, this is the art form. It's simple as a mediator. If we have people that need different things, we say, you told me you need this, you told me you need this. What would you like to do? And they're going to have to tell us what they would like to do. Maybe somebody wants to leave the room. Then you simply say, one of you wants to stay or one of you wants to leave the room. Can you give each other what you need? Is anyone willing to stay? Is anyone willing to leave the room? As soon as they can give each other what the other person needs, now we have agreement. Now we have a bit of them coming back together. And this is very important. Either they can give each other what they need or they can't. If they cannot give each other what they need, again, in this art form of mediation, I will take responsibility. It's my process I'm running it. I will say, well, thank you for what I've heard. As your mediator, this is what I'm going to decide that we're going to be doing next. I'm taking the pressure and the energy away from the disagreement now because they can't figure out what they need. And I am taking responsibility. I am making a decision. And if I do break at this time, I'll say, let's take 10 minutes. Let's go to the bathroom. Let's go do this. Let's take a walk. Let's take a drink, whatever you need. Be back in 10 minutes. I'm going to take responsibility for breaking the mediation, separating the mediation, going into private sessions. I'm going to take responsibility for what you can do. I'm going to make it nice and gracious and open so they realize they're leaving a tight mediation room where the tension's high into an arena they can go to with their bodies to relax, out into a bigger space in the mediation room, out and go call somebody, phone a friend, whatever they need to do. I'm releasing them to a greater world, a more relaxed world than the tension that's at the mediation table. So I'm going to summarize. I'm going to ask them what they would like to do now, as I've already mentioned, and then release them to what they want to do now, or to release them to what I choose for everyone to do now. Be very careful. If I'm going to take control of the mediator and choose what everyone's going to do next, I am going to ask permission. As your mediator, this is what I would like to do. Is that all right with everyone? That's one way to do it. I will do that if the tension is really high, because if everyone agrees, the art form of mediation, we're leaving the mediation table with agreement, which is very important. Because people energetically realize and intuitively realize, well, at least we agreed on that. And that will stay with them. So when they come back to the mediation table, I can say, thank you for agreeing to take a break. And now we're back together. If I decide as a mediator what everyone's going to be doing, I am showing my authority as the person that's running the process. And if that gets disagreed with, I will then step up into my role as a mediator and say, well, thank you for that disagreement. Thank you for that. But as a mediator right now, this is what I'm choosing to do. And this is the next step in the mediation process. I'm using the words mediator, mediation process, mediation table as my role as a mediator. So I'm using these neutral words, but I'm also in a very nice way asserting my authority as the person that's running the process. So that's how I would handle that every single time. We need to understand this art form of mediation, that our job is to clarify everything, all three of the essential narratives, which sometimes takes courage because we don't know, again, we do not know where the mediation is going. We cannot see what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with the people in the room. When we say to everyone, all right, as the mediator, I'm going to say, we're going to take a break. We're going to hope that everyone agrees with us, but we just don't know. But we do know what our job is. We do know that our job as mediators, we run the process. We do know our job is to clarify. We do know that we made promises in the beginning of the mediation process. We made promises that the mediation is confidential, that the mediator is neutral, that the mediator won't be making any decisions for people, that mediation is voluntary. We made all these promises. In these tense moments of when these three essential narratives come out, we have to hold steady to our promises that we made in the beginning of the process as the mediator. And the way that we hold steady is to remain neutral. The way that we hold steady is to be accepting of everyone's behavior. And the way that we hold steady is that we do not judge. Instead, we're more curious, we're concerned, we're grateful for these three essential narratives coming out. And we need to hold ourselves steady. And if we hold ourselves steady, that means we hold the mediation process steady. So let me give a few examples before we go to questions. I can share you in real time some examples of what happens when people become vilified for their words, when people become vilified for their emotional reactions at the table, when people become vilified because they've rolled their eyes at our mediation table. And instead of clarifying that, we are vilifying them inside ourselves, even though we look like we're remaining neutral on the outside, we're not remaining neutral at the outside. On the outside, we're not remaining neutral on the inside, and we're starting to judge. And we do not want to do that as mediators, and that's not what we promise to do as mediators. So there's lots of stories that can be shared, even in role-playing, in mediation training, when someone's been given a role play and they act out a part. Sometimes even then, if you're acting out a part with too much honesty, too much integrity in your role, these things can happen at the mediation table that people just don't know what to do with. And so I'm going to give a couple stories here and how important it is to hold still. My first time that I was ever challenged as a mediator, I was by myself as a mediator. I was in court. And court mediation has extra pressure. There's time crunches on it. You're giving your mediation agreement to a judge at the end of the process typically. So there's it's a lot different than a private practice where you have 3 hours to talk about issues. And in the beginning of the mediation, the opening statement, one of the people at the table wanted to discuss communication and improve communication skills. So as the mediator, we got to that part of improving the communication skills, and it became obvious at the mediation table that the person that was requesting better improvement in communication skills was not the best communicator at the table. Between the couple, that person was not as good as the other person. And when the clarity of that came out on the mediation table, this person erupted because it was dead silence, because the communication from the other person was really clear, really communicative, and it was obvious. And this person erupted. When people get upset at the mediation table, oftentimes they will blame the mediator because there's no one else to blame. You've set yourself up as a trusted, neutral person. You've set yourself up as, I'm running this process. You're not the enemy of the process. So basically people feel more comfortable with the mediator. So in that art form of feeling comfortable with someone, and also in your lives, that you tend to yell at the person that you love the most because you're the most comfortable with them. This person yelled at me, screamed at me from the end of the table. This is the weirdest mediation I've ever been in. Why can't we just write an agreement and take it to court like other mediators have done? And I sat there and I literally was scared to death. It was the first time I've ever been yelled at the mediation table. And I took a breath, and I basically, when you're in trouble as a mediator at the mediation table, you can go back to the process. If you go back to the process, it often holds you steady. It's the great rescue, going back to the process. So I went back to the process. I said, so thank you for being that honest with me right now. I hear you, and I want to make sure that I heard you clearly. In your opening statement, this is going back to the process. In your opening statement, I heard you say that you wanted to work on communication skills. And right now at the mediation table, one of those communication skills has just shown up. Do you still want to work on communication skills? If you don't, that's okay. But right now we have an opportunity to do that. Is that something that you still want to do? And she heard that. And I wasn't upset. I was scared to death inside, but I didn't show it. And she took a moment and looked at me and said, yes, I still want to work on communication skills. And I said, okay, so let's go ahead and continue to move forward. So that's a story about holding the process steady, about developing and growing. As a mediator in that moment, I grew my mediator style. I grew my mediator confidence, and I grew like a big step in my mediator courage. The first time I had to say it, and this is why I say mediator style confidence and courage, because you have to do the right thing as a mediator, because you've aligned yourself with the principles of mediation, of neutrality, and being steady, and being the person that's conducting a process. You're not a gladiator for the process, you're conducting the process. So I held myself steady. Another really interesting story from court as well is a person that had a restraining order assigned to them. They were allowed to mediate in the courtroom as long as they stood in the doorway. And this person got so upset, he started to walk into the mediation room. So now as a mediator, I've got a person with a restraining order on them that just came out of 5 years of prison time that's now advancing into my mediation room. And, seating and body language and telling someone that they have to stay in the doorway and they agree to that. And then you have a violation. I always say, in the trainings, when you set a ground rule, you have to stay there in the doorway because the court set that ground rule. And then someone violates that rule, whatever the rule is. And I encourage mediators not to have any ground rules at all, because you can handle it when it happens during the mediation. And that person violates that rule that's been set up, especially a power rule, power grading of a restraining order, someone coming from prison. Now, as a mediator, you step out of your role as a mediator and you become the referee. That rule has been violated. You now become the referee, as I've said before in past trainings, and now you have to do something, but not as a mediator. You're doing something as the referee. So it's hard. You can lose, it's difficult. You can lose your neutrality with that person because now you're correcting them because they violated a ground rule. So what I did was, the first thing I did was I used my body. He was standing up, I was sitting down, I stood up. And this is, again, the art form of mediation. If you can reiterate words, you can also, if you need to, you can reiterate body language. Because someone standing, it's got a lot more power, seemingly, than people sitting. So I reiterated with my body language, I stood up. And I said, hold on. I'm using my body. My words are saying, hold on. And he took another step into the doorway. So I took another step. So now, we're very far apart. And this time we're about, I took a step. We're like 6 or 7 feet apart. And I said, as your mediator, I want you to look right at me. I'm obligating through a directive as a mediator, because of this moment of tension, to look right at me, no one else. So therefore, all of his energy is being directed toward me. Again, this is the art form. All of his energy is being directed toward me, not toward the woman behind me, not to anyone else in the room, not to the advocates, to me. I'm taking responsibility for what's happened in the process. And I said, as your mediator, I want you to look right at me. You agreed not to step into the doorway, and I need you to back up. Do you see the switch in what happened here? It's not about what he needs right now. It's about what I need as a mediator. I'm also at this mediation table. I told him what I need in a directive form. I need you to back up right now. And so he did. He went ahead and he backed into the doorway, and I said, thank you. And I went back around and sat back down, and the mediation continued. That mediation settled, and only because of the last part of the story that I'm going to share. As a mediator in that room in private, now I'm in private session with that same person, and I've got a person that's come from prison. I've got a person that has a restraining order attached, and I've got a person that's being told used to being told what to do, that's used to not being self-empowered, that's used to using their power in the wrong way. So this last story is about how the art form of mediation helped this person undo the false narratives around them of how they were misusing their power to get to the core essence of the human being that was at the mediation table. And this is what happened. And I'll end with this, Melika, and then we'll join up together and we'll take any questions or comments if we have any at the end. So please stay on the screen with me. So Melika, this is what happened. We're in a private session, and I said, what would you like to do? I want to know what you want to do about this situation. And he started talking about, well, everyone this, and blaming everyone else. And I said, this is the fifth, as your mediator, this is the fifth time I've heard you blame everyone. That's not what I'm asking you. And I literally said to him, I am tired of hearing you repeat yourself. I literally said that as his mediator. I want to know what you want. Malcolm, he dropped his head down and he started crying a little bit. And he picks his head up and he looks at me and goes, Kathleen, I've been in prison for 5 years. No one ever asked me what I want. Right? So the environment shaping, the power and control issues and all of that. And this is what I'm talking about, respect for people's narratives at your mediation table, all of them, their words, their body language, their emotions, respecting all of it. And I said, I am your mediator. I am asking you what you want. And he put his head back down. And I waited what seemed forever. And finally, Malika, he picked his head up and he went, he yelled it. I think my hair was blowing actually, because I was right next to him. Then he yelled, I want her to trust me. And I went, I can work with that. Thank you very much. I'll be right back. And I left the private session. And I went out into the courtroom, and now I have this valuable piece of information that's come from someone's true essence. That's not complaints, not trying to, diversify, his story and try to blame others. It's actually something really true and really honest with this energetic narrative that I like to say comes from the belly of some of these emotions that come out in the mediation table. They're from the underbelly of that person. They come up through that vessel and out onto the mediation table. Now it's my turn to do something with that clarity. So I went out and presented what he said, and I said, is it possible to broker this trust? And it's actually what this other person wanted. Yes, I will take a chance and do this. So that mediation settled because that person stopped using their energy to blame everybody else, but instead used their energy to look inside them to see what they really wanted. And as the mediator, I could have stopped the mediation 3 times before that. I could have gave up. I could have said, oh, there's no way this is ever going to work. But I didn't. I hung in there and did my job as I'm supposed to. I held the space steady as mediators are supposed to. It was scary. Do you see the picture? The bridge, the San Francisco Bay Bridge is going into the unknown. I didn't know where I was going. But the point is, I was doing my job. I was using the art form of mediation, not so much the process, the art form of mediation, to see what kind of clarity we could have on this mediation table to help these people. So that's my dramatic story that I'll end with, and I'll stop the slide presentation. And we can look at the chat to see if anybody has any questions or comments.
They do have. So the first question is, in your slide where you had written what to do, so there was a word which said match their tenor. So what do you mean by that?
Match their tenor is when you elevate your voice to go, yes, that really means that you really want trust, or you lower your voice. Tenor is the same volume and also inflection. So matching someone's tenor, like when someone starts talking to me low, like I can talk loudly, I can get very excited. I can think of 13 solutions in 3 seconds and really overwhelm everyone at the mediation table. Tenor, when someone starts talking low, I lower my voice. They're talking low for a reason. That's an essential narrative. I need to match them, to validate them. And I also need to match them, not to scare them. But remember earlier I said, I reiterated a summary of what someone was saying, and they still repeated themselves 3 more times, and I realized, oh, the reason is I didn't match the excitement in their voice. So when I said exactly the same words and matched the excitement in their voice, they went, yes, and never said it again. So that's what tenor means. I can't hear you. Are you still there?
Hello?
There we go. I can hear you now. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the answer. The next question is, could you share some ideas as to what should be the mediator's approach to intervene a party who's using a lot of time in their opening statements or repeating the facts time and again and is actually using up the substantial time of the process?
Yes, and that's a very good question. Whoever raised that question, that's an excellent question as well, because what's happening, that person's getting what's called apportionment time, too much time in the airwaves. If someone talks this much and then someone else talks this much, you see the power gradient? They now have more power at the mediation table. And the mediator has let it happen. So the person that's only talking this much or only has this much time left to talk, they're wondering, how come the mediator is letting this person go on and on and on? Not only that, the person that's listening, especially in the opening statements, if the person that's doing all the talking is lying and not telling the truth, the person that's listening is like, all their bruises are getting pushed. It's sensitive and they're like, ooch and ouch, and they want to retaliate and go, no, that's not true. So this is what's happening when someone takes a long time. So one of the reasons why I don't ever lay ground rules as a mediator, especially let's not interrupt each other, be respectful, because I'm going to be the first person that interrupts. And I want my privilege of interruption as a mediator. If that starts to happen, so 2 things, I may interrupt. I'm not going to ask permission to interrupt. I'm running the process. I'm going to put my hand on the table and say, excuse me, I need to interrupt. I'm going to go, I need to interrupt. I'm using body language and my words. I want to make sure that I've heard what you've said so far is the mastery statement. And then I'm going to reiterate summary what I've heard. Sometimes I will let people go on for 3, 4, or 5 minutes. When that happens, now we have a dilemma of how do I summarize all of that? So I either start at the beginning. And then I also say this, I'm going to go ahead and summarize what I just heard. It was a bit lengthy and thank you for it. And I want to make sure that you actually add in if I leave something out. So you want the party's help in adding in, because I may forget something as a mediator. And now they're part of the process and responsible for the summary. I'm not the only one responsible for it. And this is a mastery statement. Everyone always agrees, like 100% in my practice. So then you have to start somewhere. Do you start at the beginning of what you heard? Do you start at the end of what you heard? Or does something jump out at you in the middle? Wherever you start, you want to flow all the way through. So I would say in the beginning of the mediation, you started to talk about this, 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 and this. And then I heard you say as well, you said this, this, and then finally you ended with this, 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 and this. So you have to break it into segments somehow, some way, and then you need to ask them, is there anything that I left out? That's very important mastery question. Is there anything that I left out? And let them correct you and then say, thank you for adding this. So in addition to what I said, this is also important to you in your opening statement. I also heard you say this, and they're going to say yes. Now you've summarized a long statement from one person, but now you have to turn to the other person and say, thank you for waiting, because it's been lengthy, and now they're being validated for showing patience at the mediation table. So now I would like to hear your opening statement as well. That's how you handle it, or ways to handle it. You know, the art form of mediation, those are some of the ways you can handle it.
Thank you so much for the answer. The next question is, how do you handle a situation where your position as the neutral party is being questioned?
When someone questions a neutral party, the mediator, they're questioning the mediation process. So let's remember, we're tied. We're like peanut butter and jelly. You know, in the United States, peanut butter and jelly is like one of our favorite foods when we're children. The mediator and mediation process are peanut butter and jelly. They're tied to each other. So you say to that person, so I'm hearing you say that as your mediator or this mediation process isn't serving you well, or you're having a problem, you should always be open to any problem anybody has with yourself as a mediator or the mediation process. And you need to, again, show the gratitude. How much of a problem is this for you? One time I was co-mediating with another lady who yelled at me from down across the table. And I said, so thank you for what I just heard. I said, as a co-mediator, would you like me to step away from the mediation table? I literally said that to someone, because if they're going to say that on the mediation table, I'm going to make them responsible for it, number one. Number two, I'm going to generate the options and clarify it just like I would anything else. You know, if they said my neighbor's dog, you know, dug up my bushes, I'm going to say your neighbor's dog dug up your bushes. If they're going to say, Kathleen, I don't like you as a mediator, I'm going to say, so right now you're willing to tell me that you don't like me as a mediator. So what would you like to do next? What do you need? I'm willing to, do you need me to step away from the process? What do you think she said, Melika? She said no. And then at the end of the mediation, she goes, Kathleen, I'm very, very sorry that I said that to you. And I'm like, oh, no problem. Don't worry about it. I say the mediation table is large enough to handle this. Don't worry about it. And I'm always making mediation safe for people. When people get upset, I say the mediation table is large enough to handle this. It's big enough for this. Please don't worry about anything that just happened right now. Don't worry if you disagree with each other. I expect that as your mediator. I expect disagreement at the mediation table. That's why we're here. The disagreements are going to help us forge an agreement. Thank you for how you disagree with each other. That's going to help us write a better document at the end of the process. So I'm always making the mediation table safe for people. So that's how I handle that. I'm straight. They come at me. I thank them. Thank you for yelling at me. I thank them. And then I clarify. And then I ask them, what would you like to do next?
Okay. Really great answer. Thank you so much. The next question is, what happens when a party feels like you are siding with the other party?
Again, that's never been said to me. And if it was, I would say, so thank you for telling me. It sounds like that you think there's some bias here. Am I using the right word, bias? I always ask permission. When I change a word, if somebody says you're on their side, now I'm going to reframe. This is where I'm going to reframe. I'm going to take their words, you're on their side, and I'm going to say, so you're seeing mediator bias at the table. I'm going to professionalize what they said. I'm going to reframe it and raise the standard of the word. So now I am reframing. And I'm going to ask them, so are you saying that you feel there's mediator bias with me as your mediator at the mediation table? And they're going to say yes. I'm going to say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how biased do you think that I am right now? And they're going to tell me. And then I'm going to say, all right, so thank you so much. I need to know where you're seeing mediator bias. Let's pretend they tell me these 3 things. Now I have to figure out how I want to respond to those criticisms. I know, are they right? Are they wrong? I might say, you know what? I think I agree with you. And can we please go into private session to discuss this further if you're still willing to continue the mediation? Because so it's the same process. If I'm going to expect as a mediator for people to be clear about each other, I also need to step up to the table when they want to be clear about me and not be threatened, because I have promised them neutrality. I need to honor my promise at the art form of mediation. It's part of the art form of mediation to honor the promises that we make in the beginning of introducing the mediation process to people.
Thank you so much for your answer. The last question is, what to do in the situation of no agreement at last?
Well, interestingly enough, no agreement is agreement not to agree. fun, right? So I always have fun, turning this on
That's
people.
what was in my mind, exactly.
I have so much fun with that, actually, as a mediator. I'm not laughing out loud, but I'm laughing inside. And I say, well, thank you. You're both willing to go to court. Thank you for that agreement. I want them to feel empowered from the mediation. So now they've sat through the mediation, they're more clear about what's been going on. And they're simply agreeing to go to court. And as a mediator, you don't want to have this energy that every case has to settle in mediation, because that's not what's going on in mediation. Sometimes people want to go to court, because you know what happens when they go to court? The judge makes the decision. That means they're off the hook. They can go back to their company, their families, and say, well, the judge decided. If they go back to their family and their job and say, yes, I agreed to this agreement, they can be blamed by other people. They can be held accountable. Why did you agree to that? I can't believe you agreed to that. So guess what? Now we have a new conflict from that agreement in a different way. So, not agreeing at the mediation table, the only time I don't like it, sometimes mediation is used by counsel for discovery. And that is the only time I don't like, when mediation is a bit misused as a discovery process, not coming to the table to try to really work on an agreement. And sometimes when I hear counsel asking a lot of questions, I'll stop mediation in that moment. I'll say, counsel, I just heard you ask 6 questions in a row. Are you here to understand and to work toward an agreement? Or are you here to gather information? I will literally ask the question that clearly at the mediation table, because that's what's presenting at my mediation table. I am the mediator. I'm confused right now. Counsel, what are you doing? And I will challenge counsel like that. So that's the only time that I don't like the mediation process to be used for. Any other time, if it ends in non-agreement, people know their way forward after that. So I'm good with that.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for a vibrant and knowledgeable session. I would also like to thank all the participants for joining us, and I would request everyone to please fill up the attendance form before you leave. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
A wonderful evening. Thank you very much, Mediate Guru, again, for letting me present. It's so exciting that Mediate Guru is presenting all its mediation topic around the world. Very grateful to be a part of it. Everyone have a good evening. And thank you for being a lovely moderator, Malika.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're welcome.
So Mediate Guru is upcoming. September is organizing International Arbitration Moot Court Competition. If you are interested to check us out for more details, visit our website, which is www.mediateguru.com. Also, if you don't want to miss any updates from Mediate Guru, follow us on our social media platforms and also join the WhatsApp group. Stay healthy, stay safe. See you all soon again tomorrow.
Good night.